Captivated audience.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
Yonat, could you send to the women's group, please? The link?
Yep, already working on it.
Thank you.
as much as you think, you could, if you put it in your garbage bag and then you put it in the garbage disposal, it's also fine. You don't have to worry about it, meaning, once you put it in a bag inside your garbage, whenever the time comes to take it out, take it out. I discussed this with Frankenthal and he agreed with me. What I'm telling you now about the Pach Shmita, I discussed with Frankenthal 7 years ago, and he agreed with what I'm saying. That you don't directly destroy it. That if you'll pour all kinds of schmutz into your garbage, you won't be directly destroying the Shmita fruits. You don't have to worry about that. Could be not. Not could be not. You don't have to worry. Okay, we move on. Can I continue or are we waiting for more people?
I think it's being recorded, so I think we're good.
Okay. So very verbally. Compost. Okay. About what? I just want to go back to Mrs. Rapp's question about compost. I don't know enough. Meaning it could be there's so much ethylene gas coming out from the decomposing fruits that putting it on the compost will actually cause it to destroy very, very quickly, even in a bag. I'm not aware of how it works. Meaning I don't know. My assumption is that once it's in a bag, the effects are negligible, and fruit that's half eaten is decomposing anyways. So I don't believe it's a problem putting it there. Then the question was being asked about Shabbos, and I didn't exactly understand what was the question. But I don't know if they're attached, if they reconnected yet. Okay, so we'll move on, and when they reconnect, if someone could point out to me that they reconnected, and we'll try to go back to that question. I don't know what they're asking. I'm not sure. I don't know. Okay. So there's a topic that we're not expanding on tonight, and that is the concept of Be'ur. The Torah says that you're supposed to consume the fruits of Shmita, but it's supposed to be there in your field for you and the animals of the field. So even though you're not allowed to feed your own animal food that's fit for human consumption, the Torah did say that the fruits on the trees have to be there for all of the living organisms, for humans and animals alike. So you have two concepts. On one hand, I'm not feeding my dog, but on the other hand, it's supposed to be available for everyone. So from this, the rabbis taught us a concept called Be'ur. What's the concept of Be'ur? We're not going to go into it in depth, but in a nutshell, the idea is that you're allowed to eat the fruits of Shmita only as long as those fruits are naturally still growing out in the field. When there comes a time in the year that if you go out to the field, you won't find this fruit on the trees growing naturally anymore, at that point, you're not supposed to have it in your house either. How you apply this and all the details, remind me, I'll send out a Q&A post when the time comes. It's not relevant for a long time now. So Be'ur is its own concept, and we're not going to deal with that today. But it is a relevant concept with regards to Shmita fruit, meaning if I'm going to buy 10 cases of grape juice that says oats are based in grape juice, that says it's Shmita grape juice, so I have to know that there will come a time, Hanukkah, in 2 years from now, when I'm not going to be able to hold on to that grape juice anymore. Is it Hanukkah or Pesach? I don't remember. The beer for Pesach is the beer for grape juice. Okay.
I thought it's a big wine from over here. 7 years ago, killing people, it said inside, oh, we did the deal there.
I don't have the time tonight to deal with it. That's why I said we'll talk about it later. I don't want to deal with it without addressing the Rambam and the Rash. And I don't want to do that. We're going to get back to the Arab produce in 1 second. So, if we understand right now what it means that fruits are Shmita fruits, that they have that holiness, we understand the halachic implications in terms of how I consume it, how I'm not supposed to destroy it. I don't give it to my animals, but I use it in a normal way in my home. So now we understand that if I'm buying Muhammad grown tomatoes from the land of Israel, so the question is that considered Shemitah tomatoes or is that considered not Shemitah tomatoes? When Muhammad buys a piece of the land of Israel, does it retain the holiness of the land of Israel? Does it retain the holiness of Shemitah? Or Yesh Kinyan Le'akum, a non-Jew has the ability to acquire the land of Israel in a way that removes the holiness from the land. That's a machlokas till today. In Jerusalem, the custom was to go with Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch's opinion, that we treat all Yevul Nochri as though it has zero Kedusha, it has zero Shemitah relevance to it. That's the minig in Yerushalayim. The Chazon Ish wrote a responsa where he records from the Sefer Charedim that Rabbi Yosef Karo changed his mind at the end of his life. And he gave in to the Mabit, and he said, you know what? Fruit that's grown by non-Jews in the land of Israel has the holiness of Shemitah. And the Chazon Ish instituted in Bnei Brak, and he says that he thinks that's what most of the newcomers to Eretz Yisrael, that's how they hold, that Yevul Nochri, the fruits or vegetable that grows in a non-Jewish land in the land of Israel, has the same holiness as of Shemitah. So this is a machloket. Until today, when you buy the vegetables that our makolet will be selling, our makolet is now under the Badatz Eidah HaCharedit. Badatz Eidah HaCharedit is the kashrus organization of Jerusalem that predates the founding of the state. The Badatz is before the Rabbanut. That's why legally the Badatz has legal standing that's different than any other kashrus organization, because the Badatz legally predates the Rabbanut. So our makolet here in Kochav Yaakov has the Badatz. Well, some of the produce that they're going to bring, and that's why it's important to look at the sign, is going to be Yevul Nochri, Arab or non-Jewish grown vegetables or fruits from the land of Israel. On that fruits and vegetables. So if you want to go with the Badatz, so they hold that it has zero holiness. They hold that it's regular fruits and vegetables like any other year. If you want to be stringent and go with the Chazon Ish opinion, like they do in Bnei Brak, what's called the Mabit opinion, the contemporary of Rav Yosef Karo who disagreed with him, had the acronym of Mabit, Membet Yutet, and he held it is holy. And according to the Chazon Ish, Rav Yosef Karo at the end of his days changed his mind as well. So then you treat those fruits and vegetables as their holy Shemitah fruit as well. Again, the general custom here in Jerusalem is not to treat them as Shemitah fruit. So the makolet, when it brings Yevul Nochri, when it brings non-Jewish produce, they think they're selling us produce that has zero holiness to it. That's why they're going to sell it and they're going to weigh it on the scale. They're going to sell it like you would sell to a consumer any other product, because from their end it has zero holiness. That's how the Badatz hold.
For recipes?
Yeah. Okay. So now that we finished and we understand all this introduction, we come back to the very controversial concept of heter mechira. What is heter mechira? Basically, what was invented 500 years ago or more and was reinstated 100 years ago or more was this idea that you can sell land in Eretz Yisrael to a non-Jew. Now, this is really a conflict of interest. Why do people do it? Because they want the Jewish farmer to be able to hold on to his land and develop it in the year of Shmita. So in order for the Jewish farmer to develop the land, he sells it to the non-Jewish farmer. So Rav Kook didn't like this. Rav Kook sat with his court and tried to figure out many different ways to get around this. And Rav Kook had a lot of interesting inventions in trying to be very machmir, because he didn't like this. Because Rav Kook also knew that it's against the Torah. You're not supposed to sell land in the land of Israel to a non-Jew. It says lo techonim. You're not allowed to sell land in Eretz Yisrael to a non-Jew. So that's one of the big problems. And even if you sold it to him, who said it's not holy? And even if you sold it to him and you hold that the fruit that grows there is not, who says you're allowed to work that land on Shmita? So the Heter Mechira is replete with challenges. That doesn't mean that it's not a good option. It depends which rabbi you'll ask. So there's a huge divide here in Eretz Yisrael. There are rabbis who say, hey, if you don't do Heter Mechira, you're going to have two bad problems. You're going to have all the farmers or many of the farmers working their land on Shmita, and that's a bad thing. They're not supposed to do it. And if they don't work their land on Shmita, you're going to have the agriculture in Israel suffer tremendously. And their argument is that the Palestinians benefit tremendously, and this supports the terrorist cause because they make a lot of money off of the fact that Jews are not buying Israeli-grown produce. Others claim that Rav Kook, if he were alive today, wouldn't authorize the Heter Mechira. Others claim that when you do the Heter Mechira, you're running into a million problems. Number one, does the farmer even believe in the sale? You ask the Jewish farmer, whose land is this? He says, it's my land. You tell him, what do you mean? You sold it to Muhammad. He says, I don't sell my land to no Arab. Excuse me. That's not what I did. So you tell him, no. The only reason you're allowed to work your land on Shmita, the only reason you can do anything here and sell your produce is because you sold it to a non-Jew. So he says, no, I signed some document, but it's still my land. So you run into a lot of questions as to the validity of the Heter Mechira, as to whether Heter Mechira should be allowed in our generation at all or not. So there are conflicting opinions, and these conflicting opinions date back to the days of Rav Kook. Rav Kook himself did not like the Heter Mechira, but he felt that we have no choice. What? He did it because he felt we have no choice. Meaning Rav Kook felt that the alternative was very dangerous for the Jews living in the land of Israel. Whether Rav Kook would say to do it today or not, that's a point of argument. Some rabbis who are graduates of Yeshivas Kerem B'Yavne, they hold that Rav Kook would never agree to the Heter Mechira that's today. Other rabbis, like in Merkaz Arav, there are plenty of rabbis who say there's as much a need today and maybe even more of a need than there was before. Even if Heter Mechira is necessary, that doesn't mean I have to be the consumer who buys it. Meaning most of Israel is Heter Mechira. When you travel outside of the very religious communities, when you go to Tel Aviv, when you go to the north, when you go to the south, everywhere you go in Israel, the regular Rabbanut Hechsher says Heter Mechira. So we will go back to almost 20 years ago. It was 3 years after Shmita. We went to the shuk and we bought oranges. And the whole family was by one stall, and I was the wise Alec. I went to another stall. And I bought some oranges. I said, look at the beautiful fruits at this stall. And I come back, and my wife says, what's the hechsher? I said, what do you mean? The sign? Beautiful hechsher, Rabbanut Yerushalayim Lemehadrin. I said, Rabbanut Yerushalayim Lemehadrin, what's the fine print on the bottom of the sign? So I said, gee, I don't know. So I went back to the store, and I looked at the fine print at the bottom of the sign. And at the bottom of the sign, it says, this is 3 years after Shmita. It says, some of our produce is from Shmita. Make sure you're with the rabbi whether you're allowed to eat it or not. I said, that's a funny thing for a sign. This is Rabbanut Yerushalayim Lemehadrin. You're giving a hechsher, and you're telling me, your rabbi, if you're allowed to eat it. That was very strange to me. Check with your rabbi, right? So I called up the mashgiach. It had a phone number on the certificate. And I said to him, here's the fruits I bought. Does this anything to do with Shmita? He said, sure, it's all from Shmita. I said, what? What do you mean it's all from Shmita? He said, yeah, we put it in the fridge. I know you think you're buying fresh oranges. They're 3 years ago's oranges. I said, well, wait a second. 3 years after Shmita, you're selling me Shmita food? So this is Shmita food. He said, well, I said, what about beer? There's no more oranges left in the field. How are you still holding on to oranges and selling it? He said, yeah, that's what the sign says. Ask your rabbi whether you're allowed to eat it. So I found in America that there were bottles of wine being sold from Carmel Mizrahi that were really good wines that were from Shmita 5, 6, 7 years earlier. And on the fine print in the back of the label, it said Heter Mechira. If you didn't look, you didn't know it. You thought I'm buying Carmel Mizrahi wine. I know that's a good hechsher. What's the problem? You don't realize you're buying Heter Mechira 5, 6 years after Shmita, and sometimes even more. I had a guy call me with the Shaila from America. He had something from Shmita 2 cycles earlier that he found on a shelf in the United States. He bought it off the shelf. So heter mechira is something that you will meet in every brand, meaning when you go to buy pickles, Armakolit last Shmita had only heter mechira pickles for a while. All the pickles on the shelf were heter mechira pickles. Grape juice, you're used to buying Karma Mizrahi grape juice. Well, some of the Karma Mizrahi grape juice is heter mechira. So what are the opinions on heter mechira? Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach held it was us. Rav Moshe Feinstein held it was us. There were big rabbis on the other side of the scale, meaning Rav Kook is a very big rabbi. And there are other rabbis still today who hold that it's mutter, meaning no one's saying that there's no validity to that opinion. Maybe some people are saying that, Chacham Avad Yosef, if I'm not mistaken, held that it is valid. But again, you have very big rabbis who held it's not valid. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach held you have to kasher a pot that you cook heter mechira. That's how far Rav Shlomo Zalman held, and Rav Moshe Feinstein held. Rav Moshe, say there. When we're learning in depth, we'll discuss it. You want to look up the tshuva. Rav Moshe Feinstein held that you're not even allowed to feed it to someone else's child. If a parent sends to school and you're supposed to feed their child, and they sent you heter mechira, Rav Moshe Feinstein says you're not really allowed to feed him that. So Rav Moshe Feinstein, even though he was quoted in Yeshiva, he was quoted as saying, do not mock anyone who eats heter mechira, because there are valid opinions who hold that it's kosher and they're okay for relying on them. But in the tshuva and the responsa, it seems like he takes it very far the other way. Again, in Yeshiva, what they quoted in his name, this is Torah Shabbat Peh, is that he held that opinion has validity, that you cannot disregard it as an invalid opinion. This is Torah Shabbat Peh. This is what I heard in the Beis Medrash in the name of Rav Moshe. In the tshuva, he seems to be very strongly against it. So some people, when I was in Merkaz Arab, they purposely brought heter mechira. They said this is part of helping settle the land of Eretz Yisrael. Again, it's an argument as to whether Rav Kook would agree to it today. Even Rav Kook didn't like it. Even Rav Kook held that if we had a better option, we should choose it. And that's why even those who believe in heter mechira, I believe almost all the Rabbanim will agree that Otzer Bezin is better than heter mechira, that when you're buying Otzer Bezin, you're supporting the Jewish farmer also. When you're buying Arava from the south, you're supporting the Jewish farmer also. So you have options that don't stick you there. Now, what I'm saying now, you have to be very careful with, because sometimes you have a girl who's here, she has no family. You have a guy who's learning Israel, he has no family. They have to eat by other people. If you're going to start telling them, if you eat at your mechira, boy, you're up a creek, you have a lot of tshuva to do. What'd you do to this guy? He might not have anywhere else to eat on Shabbos. It's not so simple to take, a stance that's very stringent and say, and take away the validity from the other stance. And perhaps I'll end what I think I have to say on this topic, and I think in general here, with the story. Rav Mordechai Eliyahu was giving a class, and someone said to him in the middle of his class, he said, heter mechira, that just doesn't work. And Rav Mordechai Eliyahu said, why do you say that? So he said, what do you mean? You don't hold we should eat heter mechira. So Mordechai Eliyahu said, yeah, but I didn't say as far as you. So the guy said, what's the difference? So Mordechai Eliyahu said to him the following. He said, look, the fruit that's holy from Shmita, if you sell it, so the Mishnah says, and this is halacha, that the fruit is holy, Shmita holiness, right? We understand what that means now. And the money you sold it for is also holy, can only be used to buy produce that will be eaten during the year of Shmita. Now, if you hold heter mechira, doesn't work. Well, in Eretz Yisrael, there's millions of dollars of produce that is being sold every single day. Now, the farmers are growing that produce and they sell it. Every day, you have millions of dollars that become holy with the holiness of Shmita because the farmers sold their produce. And then it gets resold another second and third time till it reaches the store, and then the consumer buys it. Now, that means that by the end of the Shmita year, almost all the money in the state of Israel is holy with Shmita holiness. If you hold that heter mechira has zero validity. This is what Mordechai Eliyahu said in his class. He said, if you want to take away any validity from heter mechira, then you can't pay for your bus fare, because chances are that every dollar you have has the holiness of heter mechira of Shmita.
You can't use the money anymore?
You have to use it for fruits and vegetables, to eat food during the year of Shmita.
credit card, checks. and savings.
You have a good answer. I'm just saying conceptually, what I'm saying, it's one thing to say whether you'll eat something or not. Unfortunately, the topic of heter mechira has become so charged that people won't eat by their own siblings on a Shabbos. People will bash one another. I'm not saying you should eat heter mechira. I didn't say that. I am saying that we have to find ways to manage within the halachos we adhere to and still maintain the peace. Specifically, in the subject of Shmita, we have Mishnayos that say that Chazal made leniencies so that there wouldn't be a divide among the people of Israel. Chazal said, if your neighbor is working his field on Shmita, which is prohibited, and he comes and he says, can you give me change? And you know he's going to use that change to pay his workers who are working the field on Shmita. The Gemara says, give him change. We don't want a situation that because he's desecrating Shmita, so now you don't give him change. He wants to break his 100 shekel bill by you, and you know he's going to use it to pay his workers. Maybe not, but you know that's what he's going to do. But maybe not. But you know, your maybe not is fake. You know, he really will use it to pay the workers. And still the halacha says, if he comes to ask you, I want to use your plow, so that's obvious. That's clear. He's using it to plow his field on Shmita. That you can't do. But if he comes to ask for change, even though you know he's going to use that change to pay the workers, you have to assume maybe not and give him the change. And we have many halachos like this. And one of the biggest people who fought for this is the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish has a whole piece where he writes about how careful we have to be not to allow the laws of Shmita to cause a divide in Am Yisrael. So yes, a person should adhere to these halachos, and a person has to find a way to do it and still maintain the darchei noam and the peace within the family, within society. That's also a very important component of success in the halachos of Shmita specifically. Now we'll take if there are any questions. I hope there are.
Where does hydroponics fit into this?
It's its own question.
Is that
It's more complex than to say yes or no. I didn't mention hydroponics because there's too many details. You'll have to go by the actual.
What's this about the money? The money, when you spend money on Shmita, like a fruit, then that money becomes holy.
If it's sold inappropriately. If what you're doing is you're buying otzer based in, if what you're doing is you're paying the court for their work, you're not paying for the fruit, so then that money has no holiness. That's fine. In otzer based in transaction, it's okay. If you hold that heter mechira works, so what you're saying is this fruit, at least that's what most people are saying, is does not have holiness. So then, if you're saying heter mechira works, so then you're allowed to pay for it. You're allowed to do transactions with it. Why can a store sell you heter mechira fruit? Because they hope that fruit has no holiness to it. Why can you pay? Why can you do commerce with heter mechira fruit? The only way you could do it is if you hold that fruit is not Shmita fruit.
It's born in Eretz Yisrael.
So if you're going to go with the opinion of the Chazon Ish that it does have holiness, so then you're right. You would have to figure out how you could buy it. That's a good question. If you want to do that chumrah, to treat heter mechira as though it's holy, to treat it as holiness of Shmita, so then you have to analyze, you have to verify what would be the correct way to purchase it. You're right. Most people who buy heter mechira treat it as non-Shmita fruit, so they don't have that problem. Any other questions? Is Mrs. Rapp with us? Okay. So I hope we covered people's questions. If you have questions, so feel free to WhatsApp. People can send in their questions. But you have to realize that there are many, many questions every day and every week. So if it takes me a little bit of time to answer, forgive me. And if you didn't get an answer within a week, so send me a reminder.
What do you eat?
I personally, you really want to know what I eat?
Yeah, I want to know what you eat. I'm not saying I'm going to eat the same
It's a
thing.
personal
I'm
question. I'm willing to answer it.
Right.
I believe that a person should not be supporting terrorists. I believe that if that means that one's diet will have less tomatoes, there are worse calamities in our life. So my children know that we don't buy produce that comes in from Gaza, if we're aware of it. We don't buy produce that we're funding the Palestinians. At the same time, I'm not eating heter mechira. So when we were living in Jerusalem, my wife and some of the times me would schlep out to the shuk. There was one store that used to sell Jewish-grown produce from the south, from other places. So we found a way to support the Jewish farmers without doing heter mechira. We also subscribed. There are two organizations that will bring oats or based in fruits there to our neighborhood here. In Yerushalayim, we bought it from a family. The oats are based in of the 2 quarts, or Nisan Karelitz or Landau. The oats are based in that are smaller, they won't sell in stores. They'll only have this little place because they say, I'm not selling you food, you're just paying for the expenses. So operational costs, right? So nowadays there are 2 organizations. One is called Mishnat Yosef. Can I post it here in the chat? I'll post it for everyone. One is called Mishnat Yosef, and they will sell oats or based in. Yeah, it's called Mishnat. Whoops, your spell check here disagrees with me. Mishnat. How do I tell it to ignore
Pretty
me?
aggressive spell
Yeah.
check.
No, goodbye. Mishnat Yosef. And the other one is called Keren or Shai. The 2 organizations that will sell in Tel Zion. If someone wants, they could send me a message. I'll send you Keren or Shai. Or Shai.
What do they sell?
They will sell oats or based in produce, and they will sell produce from the south. What? Mishnat Yosef is, so Keren or Shai is across the street from Mishnat Yosef. It's in someone's apartment. So they advertise that they will bring oats or based in, so that way you're supporting the Jewish farmers, and then you're doing it in a way that's acceptable by almost all opinions. Yeah.
Where does the cost of the produce fit into which one to buy?
That's a personal question. Depends on where a person's holding financially.
Alright.
Saying there's a difference between a guy who won't have what to eat or a guy who will have 2 tomatoes less to eat. Saying what the hefset is, that we see that in halachos of an egg, right? Okay, any other questions? Yeah. Can we plant? So again, that goes to his question of hydroponics. The general answer is no. In more details, so
When it's completely detached from the ground.
So what means completely detached? The Yerushalmi says, so long as the plant, so let's discuss it. Again, those are the details. I don't think we'll have time tonight. You want to? Theoretically, yes. Any other questions? Okay, so everyone should have a good Shmita.
Yes.
And again, people are welcome to ask questions down the road. I hope we addressed people's questions.
Last chance. Anybody? Bueller? All right, that's it.